Open for questions and comments, guys.
I think it's really interesting to and say this, being in a relationship with two people on antidepressants. It becomes a negotiation of, okay, today we can really do it, it's fine, we're feeling good. But then there are other times where it's like, I'm trying so hard and nothing's coming out. And, I remember one night, we tried for, I think, 2 hours.
Yep.
And this was new for me because before I got on antidepressants, I was very speedy and could go.
It was like 3 minutes. It was freakish.
Until I could come multiple times. Yeah. Now,
One time it was like.
Guys,
Okay.
it is a sex show.
Alright. But
You have to work for it when you're on antidepressants, is what it is.
Yeah.
You have to work really hard. And like, the first time I was on antidepressants, I was on 100 milligrams of Prozac a day, and that completely wiped out all sex drive, and I didn't orgasm for a year. A year. I was a little backed up. It was like, no, it was awful. It was like, and it wasn't even like I didn't try, because I did try. It would just be like, oh, it's the worst experience of my life. Anyway, so I was really anxious about going back on antidepressants, but like I was depressed, so I was like, do I choose happiness or do I choose sex? But how do I be happy without sex? So it's difficult. You just have to work hard.
So how do we think that the stereotypes surrounding the physically disabled affect the way non-disabled people see pursuing disabled people as sexual partners?
I think there's a lot of exotification of disability in some circles. Like, not necessarily in my experience, but in other experiences I've heard of, it's like, oh, you're deaf? That's kind of hot. I don't know. Like, it's really weird. Like, my best friend from home was like, yeah, a bunch of people were like turned on by the fact that like she was deaf. Weird.
To tie it into like not hetero narrative, just talking about like bodies that like maybe aren't read. I don't even know where I'm going with this, but I guess just like this fascination with like what's under your clothes and what do your genitals look like, and that kind of transferring on to like people who are disabled or whatever else, and just kind of like, I mean, maybe that's what you were speaking of when you're talking about exotification, but thinking particularly about genitals. I think that's playing where people are like, well, if your body is maybe different than my body, like I don't know what your body is like between your legs, so like maybe that affects whether or not I want to touch you or be touched by you, or like I'm curious, or what if I like explore that and then like maybe like your body is different than like any other body that I've seen, like what if whatever else. And I think that it's just like really I don't know. I mean, again, people's preferences are so real, but also again, like what I mean, so like what I guess what I mean to say is that like people's preferences about like what's in somebody's pants, those are very real, but also to be like gauging like that by like what somebody may or may not be able to like either perform or like thinking about like I don't know.
Yeah, I think that was actually a really good point. I think that like a prejudice against like just people with disabilities or like ableism is one of like a prejudice that like so rarely gets checked. Like particularly when it comes to like sort of like choosing a sexual partner, like it's something that people like just privilege themselves of having, like they don't have to question it within themselves, like why would I not consider like a person in a wheelchair, a person who uses canes to get around, like, or anyone else for that matter, like a viable sexual partner. Like no one is asked to ever like stop and say why, in the same way that they're like why wouldn't I consider dating a poor person or a black person or an Asian person, you know? Like, and like I feel like even in the points where disability is fetishized, like it's fetishized in a way that is grotesque, you know? Like, yeah. I've definitely been in situations where I felt like partners were like embarrassed to be with me when when I was limping, or when I, you know, or like embarrassed about the fact that I might need extra help doing things, or, you know, upset about the fact that I don't carry things, you know, or like feeling like somehow slighted, like I should be able to just get around it, you know? Yeah, and I think like that really affects the way that, or at least I, as a physically disabled person, like see myself as a sexual being, you know? Like, I do feel like extra self-conscious and like somewhat non-sexual when on the days that I have to use a cane, you know, like, and I think that that's like one of the like saddest and most fucked up parts about being disabled.
Yeah, I agree with that because, you know, when I first came to New Hampshire and first got into this relationship and previous ones too, it's always a question in my mind, like, how could this person be attracted to me? Because I have that ingrained stigma that my physical impairments are innately unattractive. You know, sometimes I will see myself in a mirror, like, walking, and I'll be like, how is that attractive, sorry, to someone else? But, you know, we don't need to really explain that because people are attracted, and it's not really about locations. But still, you can't, like, get over that stigma in ourselves, you know.
I think part of it also ties back into taboo, like we were talking about, and also, you know, saying like that, you know, assistive technologies and stuff like that, that also to some degree requires that you are really aware of like what you want to feel, or like, you know, having to articulate your desire or whatever else, but also, you know, just thinking about like stuff being a turn off rather than a turn on, like, damn, okay, so you have a cane, so that could be a little bit of fun too, you know, like, doesn't mean like you can't play within the realm of like your, you know, own personal abilities. And I think again that just speaks to, you know, taboo and people having to really work through like feeling comfortable with their desires and feeling like they, you know, want to be vulnerable to articulate them, or like maybe willing to try something that might not work and just to go there and experience that. So I think, you know, a lot of that's about fear, I think across all parties.
And we sort of just say, you know, talking about physical limitations and attraction. I think growing up for me, I remember being, you know, middle school, early high school age. And the big thing I remember is jewelry. It seems to be a universal thing of disgusting repulsion.
Mm.
It's something that can't be helped. But where does that fit into the realm of my disability? And it's interesting to think about that.
Like the issue of mobility and accessibility was really like quite a surprise to me, because I'd never thought about it before I made friends who were disabled. And then I started thinking about it all the time, because it's like, oh my gosh, are my friends going to be able to make it to Saga because, or to like the cafeteria because of the snow? Are my friends going to be able to like, and now it's like, is my partner going to be able to get to class without falling and like breaking your butt? I don't know.
I think it's something that people like choose not to think about until they're like directly confronted with it. Like even now, like the things that like I hear people who I know love me and like who are my friends like say and like do, and like the way that like, you know, like just to make one's life more difficult in general, you know, like you know you're walking too fast, you know I can't walk that fast, but still, like, you're gonna sprint ahead of me. That's ableist, you know, like, if you really loved to be around me, spend all this time with me, like, when you want to walk abreast with me, like, when you want to wait for me, like, instead of, like, trying to make me, like, function at what you think is ideal performance for your own life, I just,
Or on that, when your friends who are that close to you think that by pushing you, motivating you, and saying, I know you can do this a little bit more, they think that's helpful. And it's hard because sometimes, that has been a huge positive influence in my life for like physical therapy and like my parenting with my mom doing that. But other times, it's hard to really convey, no, fuck you, I'm really tired listening to you right now, like I need to take it slow. And then there's a whole other issue of, well, people too, we can also just be lazy as well.
True.
And like, when are we actually not really that able, or when are we feeling like, don't do it for me, So it's a balance.
I agree. I think, like, also, like, I know that my disability also comes with like a level of fatigue, and like the way that like partners perceive my fatigue, which can also be brought on by like a lot of medications too. Like that's something that like can pretty much be across the board, like both with like some physical disabilities and like a lot of medications is like the understanding that like there can be fatigue involved. And I feel like the way that people see like sex is that like it's best when it's tireless and it goes on forever and like I'll be here for a year, and it's like, okay, sometimes I'm up for that, but like other times like I'm very sleepy, and I don't feel like it should be taken as like a character flaw, like it's like the idea of ideal performance is one that is inherently ableist, I think.
And as someone with like anxiety and panic disorder, I definitely understand like that too. Like the like, okay, I can do this for maybe like half an hour, but then I'm gonna have to do something else, or I'm gonna have to go to sleep, or I'm gonna have to get out of my brain for a little while. Like, and the whole like put the issue of like people pushing you can be very difficult when you've got things like panic disorder, because you'll just be like, people will be pushing you and that'll make you more anxious, and so you'll just be like, and then eventually, like, I don't know, I've just like broken down over people being like, Sarah, can you grab me this? And I'll be like, no, can't do it, and like cry in my room for 3 hours, and like it's just how it becomes a problem sometimes.
And like the frustration when like performance does not meet what other people think of as adequate, like regardless of that, whether or not that's like in regards to ability or like just someone being a tool like that day, like it's just like, I think it's something that like is very easily internalized,
Yeah.